Welcome to this episode of the OpenScore Conversations. I hope you're having a fabulous holiday season. I'm very excited to bring to you this special guest, Tom Trones, who is the co-founder and chief product officer of Minuendo. He has been protecting his hearing since he was a young musician and has combined his various skills to create the revolutionary musician's earplug, the Lossless earplug. It is the world's only variable passive hi-fi filter earplug that also has a natural flat frequency response. This all means that you can adjust how loud or soft the sound will be as it enters your ears. On top of that, today you're going to learn about the importance of protecting your hearing as a musician, his pathway from guitarist to designing these earplugs, and what it was like to take a product from the idea stage all the way to selling a complete product during the pandemic. Although this video is not directly sponsored by Minuendo themselves, I do have a discount code for 20% off the lossless earplugs from their distributor Soundbrunner. So check out the link in the description below for more information. Let's go and meet Tom. So before we get started with talking about hearing protection and your earplugs and your journey, can you give us a little bit of a background of your musical journey and your musical background as well?
Yeah. So I started playing piano, not very seriously from 7, a bit on and off, until I was maybe 11, 12, and then I found the guitar, and that kind of took over. So for a while I was kind of doing both piano and guitar, but they crossed over as I went into like musical high school here in Norway. Doing more and more guitar, first a little bit classical, then more and more electric guitar. So after high school here in Norway, I studied music technology. So I've always kind of enjoyed that transition and the combination between the creative and the technical fields, and I think that's kind of been a red thread throughout my career, and my interest is in that finding that balance between those two. So after music technology, where I did a lot of production and live sound design and synthesis and these kind of things, I wanted to have a little bit more technical meat on the bone. So that's why I did a full acoustics degree in electronics and signal processing. So went the engineering way. So that's kind of my like formal background. But it's for musically, it's been like more and more rock, and then a lot of into progressive metal and these kind of things when I was around 17, 18, 19. And I was kind of very super focused in that direction. I think after that, I've ventured a little bit more broadly and trying to be more of a diverse musician after that.
What other genres have you grown from after your tunnel vision?
I think more pop and blues, and even trying to appreciate genres that I was kind of very against to begin with or couldn't relate to, like country music, and trying to push myself to find things that I like in many genres, even those that I maybe had a negative starting point towards.
It's awesome that you're like opening up to a lot of other genres. It's just so good to just, be in the music world that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So can you tell us, because you are now like the co-founder and also the CPO of Minuendo, can you tell us what
Yes.
events in your life have led you to that point?
Yeah, so I spent the most of my like working career after university in Cisco Tamberg. So they do video conferencing, and in that company I was able to do a lot of things that both had to do with the technical side and the creative side. So I did sound design and ringtone design for a lot of the video conferencing products there, and also a lot of project management. So when the guys that were running this project before it became a company, so this was a research project funded by the Norwegian government for 3 years, and then they had something that they would like to commercialize, and then they asked me if I wanted to join through some common friends that knew about me. So that's how I got into the company and how I co-founded the company.
Oh, very awesome. Can you go a little bit into the ringtone thing? Because that seems really interesting. Like, were you composing the tunes or how did that
Yeah,
work?
I still find it fascinating to work within very tight constraints. So you have a very tight framework. It has to loop, it has to be played on really bad speakers, and still kind of retain a lot of the same musical qualities. It has to scale to a bigger sound system and still sound good. It has to have some kind of brand identity. It needs to be played 100 or 1,000 times without you like completely getting sick of it. So it has to tick off a lot of boxes, and you have to do that within 15 seconds. So I found that kind of very narrow framework of being creating within quite rewarding and challenging.
Yeah, it is said that a lot of creativity can come from just having like boundaries because if you don't
Yeah,
have those, then you don't know what to do with creativity. So I think that's really, really amazing. And
yeah.
as we start to go into like hearing protection and how important it is, can you tell me a little bit of how you got into hearing health and protecting your hearing? Was there a certain event that happened for you?
More of a situation, I think. I'm not sure exactly where I quite early on got this awareness. Maybe it was just like the extreme levels that I was exposed to quite early on in my musical career. Um, we were like four teens in a very small basement playing as loud as we could. We had a very loud drummer. It was so tight, so we were like the cymbal was in my face basically, and my amp was in my other ear,
Yeah.
and everyone was like cranking it to kind of compete with him, and it was just not possible to be there without. And then I quite early on got custom molded earplugs with a 25 dB filter because that's was needed in that quite extreme situation. So yeah, I think I was 17 when I got my ears molded the first time. So it's quite early to make that investment in your hearing. But yeah, and even if I haven't had hearing protection with me at clubs, I'm always the guy that puts like toilet paper or something uh, in my ears, even though it looks very dumb. So I've always had that. Yeah, I've always wanted to protect myself without being, scared. But I feel, it's uncomfortable in those extreme situations. Or I have maybe I'm quite attuned to what levels are potentially dangerous, or for what time I can be exposed without it being too hazardous.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Like I have my very old like custom earplugs that I used to wear whenever I went to concerts. When it gets really loud, because you like feeling like the bass through you, right? But at the same time,
Yeah.
it has to be quite a high level of volume and intensity for that to happen. So
Yeah.
you need to protect your hearing. Was there anyone who told you that you needed to get like custom fitted earplugs, or was it just something that through your research you discovered?
I can't really remember how that came about. I don't think I can't remember that I had too many uh, people tell me that that was what you should do. Yeah, I can't remember, but somehow I got that done, and that was a big investment for me as a student at that time. So yeah, I mean, custom molded earplugs has been for the longest time the best option for most that want to retain a certain sound quality, because the filters available for custom molds can be quite good, or like they have been the best available. So I've always been a fan of that, but I've throughout the years of use found some things that have annoyed me a little bit, uh, that I wanted to kind of bring into this new product that we were making to make it even better than the experiences that I have had in the past.
Absolutely. We're going to soon get to filters and all the nifty features that we have with the lossless earplugs. But to establish a little bit of foundation for the listeners who might not know anything about hearing protection, can you give them a little foundation as to why it's important and maybe talk a bit about unsafe decibel levels or sound exposure that is healthy and isn't unhealthy?
Sure. Yeah. So basically, much like other chemical substances or gases, there's a certain dose or exposure you can get without you getting into kind of a hazardous risk area where you either in a short or a long period of time can accrue uh, permanent hearing damage. So, you might go to a concert and not wear earplugs and then go to bed, and if your ears are ringing, uh, probably you have some kind of temporary threshold shift, so like very short-term hearing damage.
Mm-hmm.
Most often that kind of heals itself, it kind of goes away, but over time that will those kind of events will accrue, and you will get increasingly more hearing damage that will be permanent. So there's no really a good way to get back from that kind of state. And the effects of hearing damage, some might take lightly on it to begin with. It might be a little bit harder to hear when you're talking with friends at a club, or you just have to speak up to, but it can have really big consequences to the way that people live their lives, and there's big correlation to dementia and death also. So there's a lot of research now that's showing that the huge effects of and the negative consequences of hearing damage. So that's what most people kind of expect, that their hearing will get worse as we age, but I think there's a lot that we can do to keep our hearing as good as possible for a much longer period of time. And especially for musicians, where, if you lose your hearing, that's going to seriously affect the thing that you love to do the most. So you really want to kind of keep that as long as possible. It's like kind of investment into your future self 20 years from now. You want that person of you, like that version of you, to have a good life and be able to enjoy music and uh, keep continuing to play music.
Absolutely. You definitely not only want to continue being able to hear and make the music that you love, but also to hear like your loved one's voice when you're older, or to hear maybe if you want to have a family, to be able to hear like your child's voice, be able to speak to them without being like, once again, can you say that a little louder?
Yeah.
Can you, if it's possible, can you go into a little bit more about the correlation between hearing loss and like dementia and death? Because that's quite a correlation.
Yeah, so and the causation part of it is still not quite figured out, but um, we do think it has to do with kind of the social stimuli,
Mm.
so that there is a negative spiral between the two, like not necessarily that dementia causes hearing damage, or uh, hearing damage causes dementia, but it's this like negative spiral of reduced social interactions and stimuli. So I'm not an expert on this, but I do trust the science in it, although I'm not maybe the person to recount it in the perfect way.
Hmm. Well, I guess that does make sense because I imagine if you are having trouble hearing on a day to day, it makes it hard to connect with others. And then if it's hard to connect with others, you feel more lonely, and then, things spiral further from there.
Yeah.
And would it be possible to talk a little bit about what are unsafe hearing decibels? And we're not all carrying around like a decibel meter and like testing
No.
things. So would there be like practical examples of how loud maybe 85 is or 90?
Yeah. So there are levels to understanding these single number values of a sound, because as we know, a very bass heavy sound or a very high frequency sound, they might have very different effects on the body, but we still, in this context, we say, okay, it has a certain level, decibel level. And it's very hard to get a really good intuition around decibels, since it's a logarithmic scale. So just like it's hard to kind of interpret an earthquake, which is also on a logarithmic scale, the Richter scale. So having a good understanding of what decibels are, it can be quite tricky. But typically, we say that to avoid a certain amount of risk, then you should stay beneath an average of 85 decibels for 8 hours a day. And for every 3 dB you increase the level, you can only stay there for half the time. So if you then go to 88 dB, if you have that as your background noise throughout the day, you can also only stay there for around 4 hours before you're incurring too much risk, or to the point where you should do something about that. And that's quite high. Like 90 dB would be almost shouting.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, but my band practice, for example, I was playing in the cover band for the last year. We used to have levels around maybe 95 to 100 dB.
Okay.
At 100 dB, you've spent your dose after 15 minutes without hearing protection.
Wow, that's fast.
Yes. So if you do that like throughout years and years and throughout a career, then there's a very high likelihood you will see an early decline of hearing ability. And my other band, where we like this previous band I mentioned, it had electric drums, so that wasn't really that loud for an amplified kind of setting. This other band I'm playing it, we're at maybe 110 decibels with acoustic drums, and we're playing really loud. And then it's just a matter of minutes before you've gone into this red zone where that day has you like in the span of just a few minutes, you've kind of spent the exposure allowance for that day. So then that's quite a serious case if you're not using hearing protection. And that 110 dB, that would be more than a chainsaw basically, or cutting metal or these kind of things. So it's quite high.
You mentioned about 85 decibels and having exposure level about let's say 8 hours, and if you're at 88 it's down to 4. Now is it a continuous 4 hours, or is it like accumulated throughout the day 4 hours?
Yeah, so all these kind of models are very simplified in order to be able to talk about it in the way that we do, to give recommendations for legislation, for example. So if you are an employer, you kind of have a responsibility to keep levels below that, and if they are higher, then you need to have some hearing conservation program in place. For example, making sure that your workers have earplugs, or that you put in more sound absorption in the symphony orchestra, or make it so that the ones that create the highest levels are maybe separated a bit more away from the others. These kind of things.
So having sound absorption, having hearing protection, if you're near other loud musicians, perhaps space yourself apart so that's not as like in your face. Are there other ways that musicians can help to protect their hearing?
Yeah, and I think the important thing that you mentioned is by taking breaks. So there is a difference between this 4-hour continuous and spreading it out and making sure that your ears have time to kind of adjust, because usually hearing damage is caused by a lack of nutrients that are getting into the cochlea, or that's at least what we think. So that there's poor diffusion of nutrients that are getting or removing the rest materials
Mm-hmm.
that you don't need any longer from that area, and you don't really have a whole lot of blood flow in that area. So you need some time to let that kind of cool off and get to an equilibrium. So I think taking breaks is a really good suggestion for that.
Awesome. What are some environments or scenarios that musicians need to be a little bit more aware of that they will know that they'll be exposed to higher levels of like volume intensity aside from, going to clubs or listening to concerts or being too close to, I don't know, the timpani when you're in rehearsals? Are there other scenarios?
It's quite easy to think that when you're alone in your studio with a grand piano, for example, you have full control of the sound. So, and it's a small room, but that's where you spend most of your time probably. You know, if
Yeah.
you're practicing maybe 6 hours a day and doing a lot of pieces that have very high intensity, you might spend your dose in that. Even for acoustic guitar, that over time that can be quite high. And for a violinist, for example, the ear that is closest to the violin, we've measured 110 decibels from the
Wow.
violin
That's like 15
at
minutes of practice right there.
yes, but you're not going to most often you're not going to do 110 decibels for 15 minutes, but if it's very high intensity, you will have peaks up there. And then if you're practicing for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week for years and years, that's going to add up over time. So even in these cases where you think you might be protective, you have full control, you're maybe in a kind of acoustically damped practice studio, it can still kind of add on to that accumulating noise exposure that you can control a bit. And I think, previously there hasn't really been products that have low enough attenuation for those kind of situations, because it feels very weird to put hearing protection in and you're just sitting alone in your practice studio with an acoustic instrument.
Yeah.
But I think there is an opportunity to take a little bit of the edge off in these cases where you're spending most of your time, and that maybe, that if you think I don't like wearing earplugs at the concert, I need to be at 100% there. Okay, maybe you don't wear hearing protection at your symphony orchestra concert, but the 90% of the time was practicing towards that concert. So that's where you put in your protection. Yeah.
Yeah. How would someone know if they have hearing damage aside from having tinnitus or like that ringing in the ear? Or is that the only symptom?
It's not necessarily so that if you have tinnitus, you have hearing damage. There's a correlation there. And, that the best way to know if you have hearing damage is to go to your audiologist and do a audiometry, and they will take you through a number of tests that check, okay, how is the like mechanical status of your hearing apparatus? Is it neurosensorial or yeah? So if there is something measurable wrong, they can try to pinpoint what that might be, and usually that can explain some tinnitus, but tinnitus and hyperacusis and misophonia, they're also quite related to stress often, how you deal with it. So there's it's not like, okay, I have tinnitus, something externally bad happened to me and now I just have it. There's this weird thing where the level of tinnitus that you experience, the ringing in your ears, it's not correlated to how much it affects your life, or like how badly you feel that it is, so how bothersome it is. So I think that's counterintuitive. You would think that the higher your tinnitus levels, the more you're bothered by it, but that's not really the case. So there's an element to how you react to that situation as well.
I see. So, as the co-founder and the CPO of Minuendo, you've created two different types of like hearing protection. The one that we're most interested in right now is the lossless earplugs, which I think
Yeah.
is absolutely revolutionary with the fact that you can adjust like your filter levels. Like that's amazing. Before we get
Yeah.
into the nitty-gritty of that, can you tell us what the lossless earplugs are, who they're for, and how they're different from just like regular foam earplugs that you would just stick into your ear like toilet paper?
Yeah, so the foundational thing is that we are using a membrane filter. So a lot of other earplugs, like the simple foam ones, they're just blocking everything out. That means that you're getting they're cutting away most of the high frequencies. So it kind of gets this kind of feeling where you're putting your hand in front of you can't really understand. You can hear some things, but it's mostly like bass that's getting through, and it's really hard to hear speech if you fitted them well. So that's they're great hearing protection, but it takes away too much of the experience for like musical settings. But if you were like cutting the grass and just want to block everything out, they're great. They're cheap. They work if you know how to insert them properly. But most people don't, so often they don't end up working, even though like they can work really well. So that may be an issue. So that's a simple foam ones. And then you have a kind of middle category where you buy just opening a tiny hole through the foam,
Okay.
and different products do this in slightly different ways. Then you kind of introduce a bass leak, and then you have slightly uh, better hear through, uh, and a little bit more controlled. You're not taking absolutely everything away, but still it's not really great for music. You're losing a lot of high end, for example.
I see.
And then finally you have the category with membranes. So like Minuendo and also like most custom molded musicians filters, they have a membrane, and that allows you to uh, attenuate the bass frequencies and the high frequencies at the same level, and that gives this natural sound. That's why we call it lossless. You're not losing any of the frequencies of the natural sound, but you are keeping, that naturalness.
For those who might not know, can you explain the importance of why it's so important to have earplugs that when they do, let's say, take the edge off of the sound or at least lower the decibel levels, why it's so important to have it equally across the low and the high frequencies?
I think it's mostly about the experience of sound, like keeping it natural. If you're a musician, you want to like have control over the tone. If you go into a concert, you want to hear it. You want to hear the vocals. You want to hear the hi-hat. You don't want to kind of just have part of the experience that the sound engineer is creating for you. So that's one part of it. And yeah, so if you want to kind of have a compromise less on your experience of your sound environment, then it's important to have it flat. But from a protection point of view, I don't see it as critical, like because it's the higher frequencies that are, you can say, more dangerous or hazardous for us. Because if we lose the higher frequencies, it's harder to discern speech, and that has the highest impact on us. It's very rare that you get a low frequency hearing loss that really affects you in an adverse way compared to the higher frequencies where where speech is.
Yeah, I think it's really important for musicians. Like they might say, "Oh, I need some hearing protection, so I might as well just go to like the nearest drugstore and buy the foam earplugs, and they're good enough." But because we
Yeah,
have to be so nuanced in how we hear the sound and the quality of the sound. If you have those, like you said, and you put your hand over your mouth, it's going to sound really muffled like this. You won't be able to
Yeah.
hone in on your craft. But
Yes.
having like the lossless earplugs or any earplugs with that filter makes it takes away that muffledness. And so you can still hear with the same amount of clarity or very close to without losing your experience, like you said, but also without. It's basically like you have your normal type of play, but it's just a little bit softer, which is really
Yeah.
great for your experience and also to protect your hearing. So with these earplugs, are they just solely for like practicing musicians, or can other people also use them?
I think they're for everyone. And if you have the budget, not you're not going to buy a pair of earplugs for $150 if you're going to mow the lawn, most likely. But so there needs to be some kind of awareness around keeping the quality good, having the need for maybe the stepless adjustment, or a need for having a quite open filter, as well as the possibility to close it. So there, everyone can use it, but everyone won't buy them because it might be a little bit overkill for the for normal, yeah, or normal use cases where you would not necessarily need a musician's filter or something like that.
So if you're going on your daily business of going to the mall, you probably don't need like custom molded earplugs or the lossless earplugs either. But if you are a musician lover, you love music, whether you're going to concerts or you just practice in your room, it might be something that you really want to consider. This podcast is not
Absolutely.
necessarily sponsored by Minuendo, but Soundbrenner did give me a wonderful code for 20% off of the Minuendo lossless earplugs. So if you're interested in that, please do check out in the description down below. I'll definitely leave that there. Thank you for that lovely segue in there. And on top of that, I'm wondering with these lossless earplugs, how are they different from, let's say, getting custom molded ones? And can you talk a little bit more about what you said earlier, where you said, oh, I have custom molded earplugs, but there were some things that annoyed me and I wanted to make something that set like your earplugs apart from the market. So what's so special
Yeah.
about the lossless earplugs?
Uh, okay, I can start with some of my experience around the custom molded. So, um, I did find that I mean, usually you have to when you're getting them molded, you have to have your jaw in a certain way, and and if you move your jaw away from that set position that you're getting them molded at, then they will kind of lose fit, and then you will experience that as like a clicking in and out. So when I'm at a concert and maybe singing along, or I'm singing backing vocals, or chewing gum or something like that, it's not a good experience. You want to keep your jaw in the same position as when you were molding them, which is a kind of a big restraint, because they're usually like just only like rubbery, semi compliant, so they're not going to give too much, give way too much to the anatomy. The other part is that even though they're custom molded, doesn't mean that they have great fit in a way. So they could have big bass leaks, and that could be due to, improper fitting, manufacturing. You might lose a little bit of weight or gain a little bit of weight. That will change your anatomy slightly as you grow older. The anatomy changes. It's not like the ear canal is constant throughout your life. So there will be sort of evolution in the way of that. You might get a false sense of security of this custom fit. That they're custom fitted for that specific place and time and jaw location. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And if you're using them to play, for example, you could move your jaw while you're getting them molded or sing along, but that will mean that they fit worse. They will have more of a bass leaks because they're naturally not, as fitted to the ear canal, because that changes when you move your jaw. So that's one thing that annoyed me. The other part was I had, semi-transparent one. They turned yellow.
Mine
They
have
were
as
easy
well.
to they're not very like they're relatively they kind of disappear in the air. Like not everyone will see that you have something in the air, which might be a positive for some, but they're not very nice when you take them out, and they're kind of hard to get hold of
Yes.
sometimes, where they're kind of deep, so they're harder to get out. And I found them relatively easy to put in, but you kind of have to have a little bit of technique to do that. So, and getting hold of them, perhaps losing them at a concert, that kind of experience was not great for me either. The third part is just like the filters. I knew that I could get other types of filters, but I never changed away from my 25 dB ones,
Yeah.
and that was usually way too much for every other situation than my very extreme band setting that I was alluding to earlier. So, so these are things that I brought with me into the kind of specification of this adjustable lossless earplugs product.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you about how custom molded earplugs, like they're easy to put in, but sometimes it can be a bit cumbersome to like pop out. And also the filters. When I got my custom molded ones, they only came with one filter. I couldn't choose anything else. So even trying
Right.
to swap back and forth, even if I had the ability to do so, would have been. It's kind of like changing the lens on your camera. Like you can
Yeah.
do it, but then it just stops the flow of everything. Then you got to make sure everything's like in the right place. You got to make sure it's all
Yeah.
fitted and nice. So I love the fact that your lossless earplugs can actually go from this adjustable attenuation, basically from 7 to 25, meaning that you take the decibel level. If it's at 25, it's going to be 25 decibels softer. Was
Yeah.
that difficult to like actually manufacture into your product?
Yeah, we had we thought we had something that worked when we started the company, because this was a 3-year research product, or a project that had gotten quite far. They had done lots of commercialization studies, and they thought they had a product almost ready for production. But when we started the company, we had the foundational technology, but basically we had to start from scratch. Uh, and then we spent a year going through dozens and dozens of iterations with 3D printers and different variants before we kind of settled on something that we thought would be great for this musician niche specifically.
Awesome. It is super important for musicians to be able to adjust from like different decibel adjustments because we are in, you might be in rehearsal and it's, you don't need 25 decibels
Yeah.
softer. Sometimes you need a little bit less. So it's really nice to have that adjustment. But are the earplugs like actually 3D printed?
No, so
Okay.
just like in the pre-production phase, we
I see.
we were reliant on that technology to figure out what we were going to make, and how we were going to make it. These the core technology that we brought with us from the research project was this membrane that was adjustable, and using this single lever,
Yeah.
we are able to not only adjust the tension of the membrane, but also uh, uh, other parts of the filter that compensate for, like, if you're tuning a drum, the frequency, the resonant frequency will go up if you tune the drum higher. So you need to counteract that to keep the frequency response flat. So we're doing that with the lever also. So that means that we can have a flat frequency response while we are doing the adjustment. And that's like the key innovation of the product, how we are able to do that adjustment while we are keeping the frequency content flat and the sound natural, basically.
How many like iterations or trials did you have to go through in order to find like what you have right now? Because I'm assuming,
Yeah.
it doesn't take one shot.
No, we had dozens. We had dozens, but by using the 3D printer, we were able to iterate quite fast. And at that time, we were four people that started the company together. So us four basically did the brunt of the work, getting that to market. Yeah.
And what was your experience like getting fit from like an idea and getting testing through the stages? Like what was testing like and then finding the marketing and actually selling it? What was your experience? What did it feel like?
Um,
I imagine
I don't know.
stressful.
Not too stressful, to be
Okay.
honest. It was kind of bizarre because we launched a product for musicians and live like concerts in the middle of a pandemic where uh,
Okay.
you know everybody's worried about their income and there's not really much events to go to. So that was maybe the biggest challenge, or worry that okay, this is the worst time to launch a product like this. But still, it's been growing really well and gradually, and we've been able to reach out to a global audience, even though we're a small company from Norway. So we're really pleased with that, and yeah, maybe us launching in the pandemic made it so that we were able also to kind of ramp up our production in time with demand, because if demand had skyrocketed way too early, then we wouldn't be able to deliver. So that has flown relatively nicely up until now.
Yeah. So it was a little bit of a blessing in a way to kind of grow the
I think
business.
so. It gave us some time also to kind of adjust to the market and figure out, like, really validate that we had a product that people liked. And if we had made some huge mistakes that didn't account for that, then uh, we might have been able to kind of adjust it, but we haven't really found a need for that because feedback has been really, really good. So we're happy about that. And you know, this we choose in the product, we choose to have 11 different type of ear tips as part of it, because we kind of have this custom molded musician's earplug as a starting point. And getting a good fit in the ear canal is critical to getting both good sound and protection. And what we've seen is, with that range of tips, which is market leading, I believe, then people are able to find things that are both very comfortable in their ear, that can adjust if they're moving their jaw, and they're super light in the ear, and that really allows us to compete with the custom molds and even be better for some people, a better alternative for some people.
Yeah, when I opened up your product and I saw so many customizable tips, I was like, this is amazing because when you normally get like regular headphones and stuff, you have what, maybe three? Small,
Yeah,
medium, large at best. And even for
yeah.
me, sometimes the smalls don't fit my ear canals very well. And having a seal to make sure
Mm,
that, you are sealing off the sound and then being able to filter in the level of your sound is really important.
yeah.
Is there a reason why, or like for each design that you have, because there's different designs, is there a specific nuanced reason? Does it help fit different ears aside from just, the different sizes? Can you go into that? I found it really interesting.
Yeah, and I think it's a matter of comfort as well. So both anatomies vary, and usually there's a balance between comfort and how well it is fitted. So the deeper something that goes into the ear canal, the less comfort it is, but the better um, attenuation it has at lower frequency. So that means that you actually get a more flat sounding earplug if you get it really deep into your ear. And
Okay.
and if you put it into the closed position, you will get even more attenuation.
Mm.
So that's part of it, but then you have to sacrifice on comfort.
Mm-hmm.
But if you choose a foam variant that you don't really insert that deep into the ear, that's really comfortable. It fits well. It doesn't fall out easily,
Mm-hmm.
but it may have slightly more bass leakage, and then that will go a little bit out over the frequency response. So um, it's something that every person has to kind of spend a little bit of time on figuring out what's most important to them and
Mm-hmm.
finding something that has the best kind of balance between comfort and fit.
What would you recommend someone to start with? Like when they first open it up, should they go with the ones that are more cone shaped or the ones that are a bit more foam and like short and round? Which one would you recommend to trial first?
I think medium foam is very popular.
Mm.
That covers a large amount of anatomies, and foam is really nice in the way that they're easy to get in and out.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're sweating, it's kind of or it's I enjoy the material a little bit better than the kind of silicone-like material,
Yeah.
which is in the single, double, and triple flanged ones. But the reason why we keep all them in is people are different, so we're
Yeah.
hearing uh, a lot of feedback that I like this one, I like this one, but we're not getting a lot of feedback that people are having a hard time finding something that fits them. So that's a really good validation that the amount of tips that we put in, even though it might be some work for the users to put in
Mm-hmm.
to find something that fits them, that we actually can compete with custom molds
Mm-hmm.
in the fit category. But there will always be, maybe less than 0.5% that have trouble or very like ear canal anatomy that is so small or so large
Mm-hmm.
that our tips can't fit, and then it's possible to do a custom mold and still use Minuendo. So
Mm.
there are a few providers that do that, but it's not something that we go out and recommend because so many people find what they need in the package.
I mean, when you have 11 tips, I would hope something will definitely score.
Yeah.
I love that you brought up the thing about when you're wearing your earplugs and sometimes you're going to sweat. That's something I never thought about as a player, but it is true, and that does like change the fit and make it more uncomfortable. Is that something that you discovered
Yeah.
while you were in your testing stages? Like, oh, people sweat when they like are on stage, and we should accommodate for that.
Not specifically. That I think uh, that might be something that people experience and then maybe switch over from the silicone type
Mm,
to foam if they experience that, or they think, okay, it's worth it.
I see.
And when I've used custom mold, that that can get quite sweaty as well
Hmm.
because it doesn't have any pores or anything, that kind of material. So
Can you describe a little bit more what the testing stages were like? You said you started off with like a team of four. So did you just test within the four of
yeah,
you and then like bigger groups?
no, no, we were quite active in going out to musicians. I have a large network of musician
Hmm.
friends and people working in as professional musicians, in orchestras and in lots of different genres. So it was really important to get feedback from the beginning. So lots of different sizes of earplugs and geometries that we tested in different ears, and it was only, but I think it was about 6 months in where we managed to reduce the size of the earplugs by around almost 50%.
Wow.
And that's finally that made it so that we could cater to female and children's ears much better,
Mm.
because before that it was kind of sticking out, but now they're actually so small and nimble that even the children of our CEO, he was able to fit in their ears. So we were very active in going out and getting that user feedback, and I think like in general really important if you're doing product development to always so that you get away from the echo chamber that you're in yourself.
Absolutely. What did it feel like to finally like have the product, like the final product in your hand and then be able to like ship it out to customers? What would that feel for you? What did it feel like for you?
It was great. I mean, we started kind of small in Norway, and
Mm-hmm.
but to be honest, looking back at it, there wasn't like a single point in time where we felt like we've made it or reached a milestone, because it was we were always like always something to do, always something next goal to reach. So um, even though we did like specifically in the pandemic, it was hard to like get together and
Mm-hmm.
celebrate like one specific milestone. So I think, yeah, that's something that we are better at now. Kind of looking back, and after 4 years, it's possible to get a little bit nostalgic to the time we were four, because now we're a company of 16 people
Mm-hmm.
and growing. So that that's interesting too, to see how the culture changes, and how yeah.
Yeah. During the whole process of taking it from like start to the end and selling it, what was the most like difficult scenario you had to overcome in this whole journey?
Mm, I think it's product development by itself. I don't think that was too difficult. There's a lot of different smaller problems to solve, but one of the bigger challenges that we kind of knew about but didn't understand the real scope of was getting hearing protection certified. So
Oh.
that just like being allowed to sell it as hearing protection,
Mm-hmm.
how much bureaucracy and testing, external testing, it has to go through for you to have it in your hands, and that it says on it that it's a CE marked product, or tested to a certain NRR in the United States, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Achieving that is that's a big achievement that you
Yeah.
take for granted. It's just a sticker on the box, but that sticker means something, and it's quite difficult to achieve. And it means that you can trust the product, basically, to
Yeah.
do it, that it says what it does. And there are external agencies holding us accountable for that. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think, yeah, that's an underappreciated aspect of it. Yeah.
It sounds like almost the legalities were more difficult than you actually having to make the product.
In hindsight, it kind of feels like that. I'm sure there were very difficult things to solve engineering wise along the way,
Mm-hmm.
but since we got over them, and they didn't stretch out at the same in time the same way
Mm-hmm.
like this did. It was like, yeah, 1 year project getting it certified.
Mm-hmm. Would you say then, like, getting it through the legalities was the most memorable thing throughout this whole journey, or something else?
I'm not sure exactly what would be the most memorable, but it feels really good when artists and musicians I look up to uh, give great feedback around the product, or magazines that I used to musicians magazine that I used to read when I growing up,
Mm-hmm.
and then, oh, my product is there getting a great review in it. That really hits home. That's a great
Yeah,
feeling.
it definitely is. You must be really proud of your product, and I think it's amazing. Like, I'm not just saying this because I'm working with Soundbird and I'm also talking to you, but I really do love your product.
Thank you.
You're welcome. What can we look forward to seeing more from Minuendo and from you?
Yeah, so you mentioned that we have two products. So the second product that has most of our focus right now is a product that is geared more toward industrial users and construction, um, people that are in different kind of noisy situations than musicians, but have equally or more statistical chance to get high levels of hearing damage. So um, a lot of companies in Norway now have this zero harm goal. No one should get sick by or harmed by working at our company. And there's a big discrepancy to the reality of that, where maybe 60% of their workers have hearing damage. So the 0% and the goal and the 60% reality, we need to close that gap. And great hearing protection has been available for decades, but still the problem is still there. So there's a need to have a product that can help you that catches the data of the user and tries to motivate you to use the product in the right way. So this smart alert earplug that we have launched, it basically tells you when to wear the product, when it's loud, so that you don't have to judge yourself when you are in a hazardous sound environment. It tells you to wear the product. If it's really extremely loud, it can tell you to wear earmuffs on top of the earplugs. In also situations you need double protection like that. And then at the end of your shift, you dock the product, and then the data of your day will sync to the cloud, and you can track improvements and exposure over time, so that you actually know what the workers are exposed to, and then you can do things around the environment. Can you have shorter shifts to alleviate the hearing damage potential for the worker? In some situations you can have longer shifts because you're actually measuring rather than just using some tables. So that's a different target area, but we're passionate about reducing hearing damage in the areas that we can. So that's kind of the next thing that we're doing.
That's really exciting. I can't wait to see how that's going to be released. Where can we find you or Minuendo, and how can we connect?
Minuendo.com. We're quite available on email and chat through our website. So if you have specific needs, go to us. If you want to buy the product, I think going through other channels at our website, you can see where to buy in your local area. If you're in the US, we have Soundbrenner or Amazon. In Europe, you have Tom and Gear for Music that are quite available.
I believe in Canada, because I'm Canadian, Long McQuaid is also offering that as well too. Thank you so much for joining me on this podcast and talking about the lossless earplugs. It's been a pleasure speaking with you and learning about your journey. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate it as well.